Hope everyone enjoyed last night. I know it's kind of an early start, but I know somehow, some way you'll survive today until maybe the football game this afternoon. We'll see who the victors are. So it's my great honor to invite Jeremy Utley back to speak with us. He spoke a few years ago, and he set a pretty high bar because you'll get a survey afterwards, and they rate all the speakers. And that year, he was the highest rated speaker of the whole summit. And don't tell Condoleezza Rice that. She may not be appreciative. But Jeremy did a phenomenal job. And as you may know, and you read his background, he's an adjunct professor at Stanford, who's been very active in the D School, which is the design school here, which is a phenomenal program, world-renowned. And I believe he claims, now this is, we don't know if this is urban legend or not. He claims to have trained over 1 million students. So it's probably some truth to that. But in any event, he also is an author of a book we gave out a few years ago called Idea Flow, and it's the only business metric that really matters. So I think that those of you who are interested following his talk, can arrange to buy the book. It's available on Amazon, and I think it's a great read. And it's really about idea creation, and it sort of stimulates all of us to think about how we can take, what we do every day and help our organizations improve by generating a lot more creativity and bringing this sort of growth mindset to the work every day. He's also runs a firm called Free Spin Capital, which is an investment business. I think he, again, tries to bring some of his skills to the world of private investing and has a lot of fun. He's a terrific guy, family, 3 daughters or 4? 4 daughters. 4 daughters. And so he's got to join us this morning, but can't stay all day because he's got some family responsibilities, you might imagine. But welcome, Jeremy Utley, and thank you again for your participation.
I appreciate you. All right, that's a tough introduction to follow. This is the highest rated speaker from a couple years ago. The only place he can go is down. I don't know how it can get better, but I'm excited to share some of the stuff I've been working on over the last couple of years because, as Mark mentioned, my book came out in October. I think I was here in the summer of 22. Book comes out in October, and then lo and behold, a month later, this thing called ChatGPT comes out. So what I thought was going to be my kind of call it whirlwind victory tour of my book tour quickly became me actually strapping my seatbelt and becoming a front row student in this amazing new technology. And what I want to do is talk to you today about the intersection of idea flow and generative AI. And so for all of my credentials, so to speak, the thing that I would say is just scratch all of it out, okay? All of my credentials I feel like can be scratched out right now because I'm a front row student in the classroom. And I've been teaching here at Stanford for the last 15 years, but in the last 2 years, I think it's my student kind of orientation that has really benefited me and really helped me learn a lot that I hope to share with you today. So I hope to share as a fellow front row student, so to speak, in this exciting classroom. And what I found is generative AI isn't just helpful for organizational transformation and personal creativity, it's also helpful in domestic affairs. Okay, so this is my front bathroom. And as Mark mentioned, I have 4 daughters who are quite rambunctious. And you might imagine how many times I've asked them, please don't slam the doors. Please don't slam the doors. We live in a 115-year-old house in Mountain View. This is a 115-year-old window, which, as my contractor would say, is irreplaceable. And the girls were running through the house the other day. One slams the door in the other's face, and the other thinks, I bet I can just reach through the window. And thankfully, nobody was hurt. But I remember very distinctly, I'm making breakfast, I'm actually making eggs, and I hear this cacophony, which is not abnormal in my house. I hear the cacophony, and then I hear the girl start saying, Dad, and I do what every responsible father should do, which is pretend, you don't hear anything. And I keep flipping the eggs. Dad, seriously. And then my eldest daughter goes, Dad, there's glass everywhere. So I turn off the burner, walk down the front of the hallway, and I see this. And the question is, how does Daddy respond? What do we do? And my wife and I hemmed and hawed in the front hallway for a moment. But I want to tell you that generative AI delivered one of my greatest parenting victories of the last dozen years. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? This is a little bit farther down the learning journey, okay? My goal today, what I hope to do for you, is I want to spark you, a fire in you to become a Gen AI conversationalist. And you might think, that's not a very big goal. And I would say baby steps. No, I'm kidding. Really and truly, the fundamental shift that has to happen is actually a mindset shift toward this new technology. Because there's a bunch of hype right now. If you look, for example, this is a recent study conducted by LinkedIn and Microsoft. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a great study. Take a read. And the technology right now is being hyped enormously, and we can't afford to miss out, right? You see stats like this. 31,000 leaders surveyed said, 70% of those surveyed said they would rather hire someone who doesn't have experience but is adept with AI than someone who does have experience but isn't adept with AI. Is that shocking to you? It's shocking to me, for sure. And you see stats like this. There's an amazing paper, actually, from the dark side. I'm kidding. But an amazing study actually was recently conducted amongst BCG consultants. I actually started my career at BCG. And this is what they found. Every single way they could measure performance, the individuals that were using ChatGPT outperformed those who weren't. Okay? I call this the performance potential of generative AI. The problem is very few individuals that I speak with are practically experiencing the kinds of gains that are supposedly being studied. And my passion has been to help people close the gap between the possibility and their present reality. So that's what I want to talk about today. And one thing that I would mention to you is if you said, oh, I've tried ChatGPT last year and really wasn't that great, I'd say this is one thing that you have to be careful about. The technology is changing so rapidly that you might be inoculated. And here's what I mean. Probably a year ago or something like that, you heard about this thing called ChatGPT, and you open it up, and you effectively Googled yourself, right? Said, let's see what it knows about me. And it maybe returned garbage, and you concluded it's not good. This isn't a good technology. That is the wrong way to think about it, not only because it's not a search, but also because the technology is advancing so rapidly and its capabilities are growing so quickly that a weird experience or a disappointing experience a year ago really has no bearing on the capabilities of today. And so if you aren't using a frontier model with the best capabilities today and evaluating the possibility based on what's available today, or based on maybe a weird experience a year ago, you're probably missing out. And you're probably not even talking about the same thing. An easy way to put it is, if you think about GPT 3.5, which was available publicly a year ago, it's like a high school sophomore. Now, GPT 4.0, which is actually freely available to anybody today, is more like a first or second year doctoral student. And so if you wouldn't give it to a high school sophomore, which having been a high school sophomore and having worked with a lot of high school sophomores, I know the capabilities there. You probably shouldn't have given it to GPT 3.5. But now there's freely available technology that's effectively the equivalent of a doctoral student. And the kinds of things you can ask of a doctoral student are radically different than what you can ask of a high schooler, right? And so you have to be updating your expectations. And if you've bounced off the technology in the past, I just want to mention that's no excuse to not continue to play and experiment, okay? This is ultimately about you. It's not about organizations. It's not about something bigger. I think it's about you being able to do more, better, faster. I truly have experienced and have worked with many individuals and leaders and organizations that have experienced profound productivity gains, not just in parenting, but in my business as well. And I want to share some of the ways in which I have learned that will help you unlock that potential as well. As Mark mentioned, my kind of background is innovation. My expertise is in creativity, entrepreneurship, design thinking. And so I can't really talk about AI without first setting a little bit of context for innovation so that you can appreciate how I think about innovation in particular, okay? And as Mark mentioned, I wrote a book a couple years ago called Idea Flow. The basic premise of the book is innovation's not an event. It's not the workshop or the sprints or the hackathon or whatever, right? Innovation is a practice. And as former athletes or as present athletes, once an athlete, always an athlete, right? You can appreciate the fact that when you approach something like an event, it's a very different mindset than approaching something like a practice, like a capability that you routinely cultivate and nurture, okay? And this question, how do I come up with a good idea? It's rapidly changing, but this is a question I hear anywhere I go in the world, whether it's Tokyo or Tel Aviv or Topeka. People want to know, how do I have a good idea? This is the wrong question. And the reason that I know that is because I'm a nerd. I spent a lot of time researching this. This is my nerd hero, Dr. Dean Keith Simonton. Isn't he handsome? I have a nerd crush on Dr. Dean Keith Simonton. What he found, okay, is he studied breakthrough thinking across disciplines and across time periods and across geographies. And this is what he found. This is kind of the thesis statement of a lot of his research. The single greatest determinant of the quality of your ideas is the quantity of your ideas, which is to say, if you want better ideas, have more, okay? And this is a fundamental shift. I talked about it at length a couple years ago. You can watch that talk if you'd like. But just to illustrate the point, this is Jerry Uelsmann. He was Ansel Adams' photography assistant. He's also a professor at the University of Florida. And what he does in a kind of famous experiment, a famous demonstration, he basically divides his class in half. Because as you know at Stanford, and I'm sure it's the same at the University of Florida, every student wants an A. Every student. And anytime around May I get an email from a student, I just have an auto reply, which is, the criteria for grading are the following. You can consult the grading criteria, right? It's standard, right? And so students come to Uelsmann at Florida and say, how am I going to get an A? And he's done this several times. It's an amazing study. He basically says, okay, I'm going to divide the class in half. Half of you, if you want to get an A, you have to turn in a spectacular photo. And I'm going to bring in a jury of esteemed peers from, National Geographic and Vogue magazine, and they're going to evaluate the quality of your work. And if you want an A, you have to turn in an amazing photo. If it's pretty good, you'll get a C. If it's good, you'll get a B. But to get an A, it's got to be incredible. But then he says to the other half of the room, totally different grading criteria for y'all. I'm from Texas. If you want to get an A, you have to turn in at least 100 photos. Doesn't matter how bad they are, that's the good news. They can be 100 terrible photos, but if you turn in less than 100, you're getting a B, or if you turn in less than 90, you're getting a C. So quantity versus quality, you could say. He effectively divides his class into a natural experiment. And then what happens is he brings in a jury of professional photographers, and at the end of the semester, they grade all the photos. But here's the thing. Uelsmann doesn't tell them about his little experiment. He just tells the photographers to grade the photos. And what do? They look, obviously, at the quality of the work. They assign every single photo a grade. They don't know about the experiment. They don't know where the photos came from. But then Uelsmann takes all of the jury's grades, and he then assigns the control or experimental condition. And it's shocked his students for years, and it shocks the jury every time, because at the end of the semester, when the dust kind of settles, the folks whose job was to take a spectacular photo, none of them do it. 0 A's. However, there are lots of A's in the class, and they all happen to come from the group of students whose job was to take 100 photos, irrespective of quality. This is what Simonton was talking about, the way to produce good work. I would submit to you, by the way, a photo is a picture or a metaphor for good work, right? When you're trying to, very few of us are photographers, but all of us are trying to get A's. You want an A at work? You want to get an A performance review? What Dr. Dean Keith Simonton and Jerry Yulsman illustrate is the way to have a great idea is to be generating a lot more ideas. And so you might ask yourself, okay, how do I have a lot of ideas? Okay? If I know this is true, hopefully I've gotten you to ask this question. How do I have a lot of ideas? Or how many do I need? That's how many you need. Dr. Bob Sutton and Andy Harganon here at Stanford have studied innovation in organizations, and what they found is if you want to have a commercially successful idea, you need about 2,000 ideas to start with. And the basic, if you work backwards through the funnel, here's what you see. To get to one that's commercially successful, you need about 5 in market. To have 5 products in market, you need to be building about 100 prototypes. And to get to the point where you have 100 things worth building, you need about 2,000 ideas. This is what we call in the book the idea ratio. And by the way, this ratio holds true across disciplines, okay? It's true. James Dyson made 5,126 versions of the bagless vacuum before the 5,127th version worked, okay? My favorite innovation, the Doritos Locos Taco from Taco Bell, clearly. The head of Taco Bell's food lab, she was interviewed, actually, a really great interview. She said she tasted over 2,000 different variations of the shell before they launched. In pharmaceutical discovery, the number's more like 10,000 to 1. The point is, you need a lot of ideas. And it's true, as Simonson found, across functions, geographies, and historical eras. This is always held true. So here's where things get weird. If you want a good idea, the best way to have a good idea, or to have a lot of ideas, is actually to allow yourself to have a bad idea. I'll say that again. Allow yourself to have a bad idea. Don't take my word for it, though. This is what Taylor Swift said recently. I want my fans to know it's the hundreds or thousands of dumb ideas that I've had that have led me to my good ideas. I've been saying this for years, and then when Taylor Swift says it, it becomes true. Okay? And you might be thinking, hang on a second, Jeremy. I'm not trying to shake it off. I'm in a very serious business, okay? And the way things work in my business is, it's different. I'm not a photographer, I'm not a pop singer, and Swifties in the crowd are like, what, pop singer? What? Right? But here's my question for you. How did Steve Jobs work? Do you know? Sir Johnny Ive, in his memorial address, probably the greatest living designer, he ate lunch with Steve every day. And he said, every day, Steve used to say to me, hey, Johnny, here's a dopey idea. And Johnny said most of the time his ideas were pretty dopey. In fact, sometimes his ideas were terrible. But every once in a while, they take the air out of the room. And I think it's important. We don't think about that when we think about Steve Jobs. We think about the iPod. We think about the breakthrough. We think about all of the delightful ideas. We don't know the dopey ideas. But Steve Jobs knew what Taylor Swift knew, which is, and I hate to geek out, I heard that you had a statistics lecture yesterday. I'm a huge stat nerd. So I'll just kind of remind you of some of your basic statistics, okay? How are naturally occurring phenomena distributed? I know you're like, wait, I got to dig deep for that. Okay. They fall on what's called a normal distribution, right? And ideas are naturally occurring phenomena, which mean what? A small percentage of our ideas are kind of the iPods of the world, right? A small percentage of Steve Jobs' ideas are the iPods, right? The vast majority of our ideas are totally ordinary. And then a small fraction of our ideas are dopey, or to use Taylor's words, dumb, right? This is the nature of things. And the danger, especially for those of us who are type A, who are high achieving perfectionists, which I know none of you are, but I'll admit it. I'm a recovering MBA. I love a good spreadsheet. I love a good pivot table. And I only want good ideas. And I'll tolerate okay ideas, but the bad ones? Remember, the premise here is you have to allow yourself to have bad. And why is that? Because if you say, I love good ideas and I'll tolerate mediocre ones, but the dopey ones, I just want to get rid of those. You see what happens? You can't just get rid of the bad ideas. Quality is a function of variation. And in order to allow yourself to have great ideas, you have to allow yourself to have bad ideas too. You could say that dopey is the price of delight. That's why Taylor Swift said, you have to give yourself permission. And so you basically have a choice. Which distribution do you want? You can pick either one, but there's no asymmetric distribution available to anyone, not even Steve Jobs, not even Taylor Swift. You can have, if you want delightful ideas, you have to have dopey. If your goal is to not have dopey, that's fine, but you don't get delightful either. You have to choose one. And so, hopefully, I'm kind of causing you to go, okay, wait. So it's about volume and variation. How do I increase the volume and variation of my ideas? That is the mindset I brought to this incredible new technology. Because as I said, my book came out in October of 22, and then this product launches November of 22. And I'm the innovation guy. I'm the guy going volume, variation, and all of a sudden, we've got a tool with literally infinite capacity for volume and variation. It'd be like writing the world's greatest book on retail just prior to the internet emerging. Which is to say, it's wild. You look at my book, you go to the appendix, what do they call it? Index? Yeah, index. AI is not even in the index. This is insane. And the point is, this technology caught us all by surprise. And so what I spent the last couple of years doing, since being with you last, is diving deep into this technology, not because it's some new thing, but because it's a means of doing the thing that I really already know how to do and have already helped millions of people do. But now we have a tool that can do it better. So myself and a colleague from Singularity University, Kian Gohar, he's also from the dark side originally, so we don't hold that against him. But Kian and I started studying what happens to innovation teams and creativity in organizations that have access to this tool. We studied firms and teams in Europe and in the US from industries as diverse as manufacturing and financial services and insurance. And we started asking what happens to the problem-solving approach and to the innovation approach. And to be honest with you, I thought we were going to be conducting a study that was about how many more times creative are teams with ChatGPT. Are they 2 times more creative? Are they 10 times more creative? Are they 100 times more creative? That was what I was thinking. And so you'll imagine my surprise when the data started coming in. And it's not 2 times more creative or 10 times more creative. It's kind of, most of the time, not even as creative. And I started reading, I remember the first data started rolling in. My honest first thought was, oh no, like we did something wrong. And then of course, the devilish, oh yes, oh, interesting, right? And we ended up writing this paper, or writing a research study that got published in Harvard Business Review just a couple months ago. And the basic premise, you can read the study if you want, you can go online and find it, but here's the basic premise. Most of the time, teams that leverage generative AI fail to outperform their non-assisted counterparts. Sometimes they outperform dramatically, but often they don't. Often they actually underperform. And there's, pardon me, I just get choked up when I think about it. There are predictable and preventable cognitive biases driving this underperformance. It turns out the cognitive biases that are affecting this have been demonstrated in research Abraham and Edith Lutyens famously in something called the water jar experiment. They've been demonstrating how humans have had a cognitive bias around problem solving since the 1940s. And this new technology comes in, which has the potential to unleash untold human creativity. And if you believe Harvard researchers at BCG, they're unlocking enormous value. And yet most people I talk to are going, it doesn't even know who I am. This kind of sucks, you know? And I go, there's an enormous disconnect here. And that disconnect I'm seeing propagate in organizations. And fundamentally, it comes down to an orientation. The teams that outperform treat AI differently. Most teams approach AI and they think it's got the answers, it's the oracle, it's going to give me the right answer. And you know what they get? Just like Yulsman's students, whose job is to take one great photo, they kind of get a B. They do actually get like a pretty decent answer. And if it takes like 3 seconds, you know what the human teams do? Let's go get coffee. It was pretty great. That took like 3 seconds. And they just turn that work in. Human teams struggle and push and wonder. But AI-assisted teams that outperform, what they do is they treat AI more like a coworker, more like a collaborator. And it's a fundamental mindset shift. And so you can ask yourself, do you speak AI? That really and truly, I believe it's almost about a language acquisition or an orientation. Do you speak AI? Does that sound like crazy talk to me? To you, sorry? Does it sound like crazy talk? You have to get to the point where you are conversationalist. And what I want to do is I want to provide you a few, I like to think of them as shooting stars. What do I mean by that? Our imagination is sparked by unexpected input. This is kind of fundamental cognitive science, that when it's something new comes in, that's when our imagination gets sparked. So my favorite example is Johannes Kepler, father of planetary motion and heliocentricity, kind of a big deal. Back in his day, the fundamental or the existing paradigm was the sky is firmament. It's literally a fixed substance. That's what they thought. And Johannes Kepler one night was gazing at the night sky and he saw a shooting star. And you know what he thought? Why isn't it cracking? Why isn't the firmament breaking right now? And it's that unexpected input to someone who is primed to receive it. His training did matter. But it was the unexpected input that led him to radical discoveries that changed how every human being understood the world. And what I want to do is I want to provide you just a few shooting stars, so to speak. Things that spark your imagination to go, wait, could it? If I can get you to ask, could it, one time today, I win. I declare that a win, actually. So I want to showcase a few examples, a few simple ways that you can think about learning this language, because it really is a language of innovation that will unleash you and your ability. And then 2 also kind of quick watch-outs with the time that we have remaining. So here's 4 ways to learn. The first thing I want to mention is natural language is not your thumbs, okay? Most of us are used to interacting with a screen or a device with our thumbs or with our fingers. The thing that's amazing about natural language processing is you can now use your natural language, which is your voice. You should not be primarily interacting with AI with your fingers, okay? So, for example, here's just a ChatGPT screen. You see the microphone there. That will trigger what, so OpenAI was, quietly launching the fastest growing consumer application of all time. And while they were doing that, they reinvented speech to text, just like for fun, okay? You may not know that, but what you can do is you can just start talking, okay? I do this for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. I'm just rambling. I'm literally babbling. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm getting at. And then, whenever you're done, you just hit, stop recording, and it will do speech to text. You can see there, I tried to, be as, fast as possible the other day. I'm trying to give an example of how good the voice to text technology is, so I'm talking as fast as I possibly can and really mixing up my words because I want to make sure that it shows how comprehensively and error-freeless it really works. And it gets error-freeless, which isn't actually a word. It's kind of cool, right? And then it hits me back, voice to text has come a long way, and it's impressively robust, even when you're tossing a verbal salad at high speed. Look, it says, even if you're channeling your inner auctioneer, the tech can keep up. I'm like, what? Okay, how does that work for me practically? I'm just going to invite you into my life for a moment. Because remember, Mark said I've got 4 daughters. I don't have a lot of free time, okay? So when can I exercise? Usually it's during my lunch break, which is a joke, but that's my lunch break, right? So I got a morning full of meetings, generally like either sales stuff or classes or something. And then if I'm looking at my calendar, usually 1 to 2 is kind of, ish blocked. And I've got a little bit of time. And so what I'll do is I'll start stretching. I'm going to go on a run. And I just start blabbing. Hey, I had a call with Mark, and I did that talk at the Campbell Trophy Summit. And a couple points that I made. One was I got to take its voice. And the other is you want to make sure to you want to turn the tables on AI. And, make sure that you write Kirby back because he dropped you a note on LinkedIn saying that he enjoyed your talk last time. I was really looking forward to this one. And on and on and on. I'm just freestyle. Oh, and then in the next meeting with Lisa from Harvard Education School, she wanted to talk about agency as a means of promoting creative wellness. And I wanted to link to that podcast that I saw the other day about someone mentioning agency was trust. I think it'd be really cool, so maybe we can drop that link in. And then I know this afternoon, I've got to get back to so-and-so, right? I'm just freestyling. Would you quickly write that into a memo that I could send to myself so I don't forget that stuff while I'm running? That's a normal Tuesday. I've got a meeting on campus. I live in La Honda in the mountains, right? Very windy roads. And I'll be driving and I'll go, hey, I had a meeting with Paul from the GSB and he asked me if I would pull together a proposal for this new exec ed that we're thinking about offering in connection with the AI program. Could you please, my thoughts are we got to get way more practical. All of the existing training right now on AI is very technical in nature, explaining the fundamentals of tokens and LLMs, and it doesn't leave people with any really realistic understanding of how to get started today. And so what the unique perspective I think I could bring is enabling people to know how to get started even though they don't understand it, because they get on airplanes when they don't understand how to fly, and they eat food even though they don't understand their digestive system, and they send emails even though they don't understand the internet. But right now, for some reason, everybody thinks you need to understand LLMs before you use them. Actually, that's a really good metaphor. Would you make sure to include those 3 specifically and maybe provide me 2 others that I hadn't thought of, but as examples of things people use without understanding while I'm driving? Please write a first draft of that so that when I get home I can review it real quick. This is unleashing human creativity. You know how long it would take me to send Paul the follow-up note that I was supposed to send him ordinarily? It's like a week, because I get home, and as soon as I get home, my kids are coming to the car, and short-term memory totally gets cleared. I forget all the stuff, right? I make dinner, and then I sit down at 10 p.m. I'm like, dear Paul, great meeting today. Let me know when we can follow up. Maybe, if that, right? That's just how it is. And all of a sudden, all of my on-the-fly thoughts and real-time processing is enabled because I have a co-intelligence, as my friend Ethan Mollick at Wharton calls it. I have a co-intelligence who's capable of understanding, transcribing, synthesizing, first drafting. All of it's unlocked by my voice. All of it's unlocked by the fact that I'm not having, I'll get to this in a second, this isn't Siri, okay? Next paragraph, comma. When you're using Siri, right, you've got to be like overly prescriptive, which kind of gets in the way of actual thinking. We can now think at the speed of neurons, not at the speed of our fingers. That's incredible, okay? The second thing I want you to think about is turning the tables on the AI. Realize I'm giving you a lot here. I'll give you some resources later. We are not going to be able to even hardly scratch the surface here. Turn the tables. What do I mean? You should always append any request with this kind of statement. Before you answer, ask me 3 questions so that I make sure you understand. Here you go. AI can ask me questions? Yeah. That's the simplest example. The other day, my wife and I are going, hey, we've got teenage daughters, and there's no handbook for how to raise teenage daughters. And we had a situation unfolding, and we said, here's the situation. We're talking with ChatGPT. Would you ask us 3 or 4 questions about her and about her friend before you give advice about how we should think about that or provide frameworks for how to think about it? Sure, and it just goes off asking us questions. My friend Juan Carlos, I had him on my podcast recently. He's an amazing documentary filmmaker. He made the documentary Second Skin, which is all about kind of like online lives. He said he's always wanted to build an iOS application, but he's never been able to until ChatGPT. He got on ChatGPT and he said something like this. Talk about turn the tables. This is radical. He said, hey, I want you to pretend to be my computer science professor or my TA. By the end of the semester, I'm supposed to have published an iOS application, but I don't know the first thing about it. Can you take me from no knowledge whatsoever to hitting publish on my first iOS application in the next 10 weeks? What's the syllabus? What are the daily assignments? What's my first assignment? And it took him a few weeks, but over the course of a few weeks, he got ChatGPT to teach him how to publish his first iOS app. You go, wait, it can what? Exactly. These are shooting stars. I'm just trying to give you shooting stars that hopefully break the firmament, and you go, it can, yeah. Yeah, it can. It can do a lot more. Okay, by the way, I've never been paid by any of these companies or anything. I don't get anything. I just am supremely unlocked, and I think it's a shame if any of you leave not being unlocked as well. The next thing I want to mention is regenerate. And you go, yeah, regenerate what? Yeah. What's the most important thing on this screen? So you see, I've asked LLM a question. I'd like some ideas for how to open a lecture about how to best leverage generative AI, right? Absolutely, it just starts launching right in. The most important thing on this screen is right here. Did you see it? You go, wait, where is that? Do you see it? It's grainy because it's so small. It's right here. What is that button? Regenerate. You know what that means? Try again. Do it again. Generative AI models are non-deterministic, which means they're how do you say? They literally think again. So you ask me a question, hey Jeremy, what's your, ask me anything. How should I try to break into the software? It's like, you can do this. If you said, well, what else could I try? Well, you could do this. What else could I try? I wouldn't say the same thing. You ask Google a question, it will give you the same answer again, because it's a deterministic search. You ask ChatGPT a question, it will try again. I recommend you never ask a question without hitting regenerate at least 3 times. Every single time, it's like, it's a great question. Let me tell you how I think about that, right? And sometimes they're radically different responses, radically different. And don't worry about clearing. You can always click between the responses. You can see them all. But think in terms of this. Again, this requires a paradigm shift because technology has trained us. It's always going to give the same answer. This is not Excel. And I hate to break it to my fellow financial analysts who love a good pivot table. You cannot. You actually can encode a spreadsheet with to call on an API, which is mind-blowing. But it's not going to give you the same answer every time. It's sparkable. The most important thing about a collaborator who's trying to be, who you're leaning on for creativity is they're like, oh, what about this? Ooh, what about this? ChatGPT and other language models can do this. The problem is the human takes the first answer that's given and goes, well, that's pretty good. Great job, ChatGPT. And you have to retrain yourself. The problem with human AI collaboration is the human expectation, right? And that's what we have to train out. So again, I'm just giving you some drills here. Last thing I'll mention here is respond. I was talking with a senior clinician at Harvard Medical School who's building a training program for clinical rotations. And she was applying for a grant. I was actually asking her, I've got kind of a small group that talks about how we use technology. And we have a monthly meeting. And she was talking about, oh yeah, I got ChatGPT to write me a grant proposal. It was amazing. And I said, well, how did it work? She said, well, I got it to take this grant proposal, and then I just kind of edited it and stuff. And I said, well, did you tell ChatGPT what was wrong with the first draft? And this is what she said. It never even occurred to me to talk back. Right? Again, you don't talk back to Google, right? With ChatGPT, I'll give you an example. I had Ed Catmull, one of my life heroes, Academy Award winner. He worked with Steve Jobs longer than any living person. Ed was on my podcast. I said, I want the best title possible. So I asked ChatGPT, what are 10 suggestions for a podcast title? And then I said, okay, will you give me 10 more? Let's see. At the end, you see that? Can we try 10 more? Sure. Here's another 10, right? Sure. And by the way, ChatGPT never says, dude, I've already given you 10. Right? Right? It's a tireless, indefatigable intern, right? So, okay, here's another 10, right? So I said, look, I like numbers 3 and 8 in first set, and 1, 6, and 10 in the second. Can you generate 10 more? Here's the thing. The next 10 weren't that good. And I was like, what's the deal? So then I did this, and I'll dial in. Look at this. This is what I mean by respond. It requires thinking. This is what humans don't like. I just want it to read my mind and just like do the thing. Is that how you treat your junior employees? Read my mind, dude. You're fired. You didn't do a good job. It's just crazy, right? You actually have to tell it what you think. But if you tell it what you think, like I did here, notice all of the thought I put into this. Why did I like those? The next 10, I couldn't choose between the next 10. They were all so good. But that's the point. Collaborating with the AI. Give me a title, that's treating AI like an oracle. Give me 10 titles, still treating AI like an oracle. Here's what I like about what you did, and here's how it could be improved. That's treating AI like a collaborator. It's a back and forth, dynamic, I would say relationship even. I realize that's a weird thing to say, but I think it's a more helpful metaphor for effective collaboration than thinking about it like a technology. Okay, 2 watch-outs very quickly. Tech as programmed does, right? First, obviously, paradigm being Google. First result, always the best result, other than ads, right? Or actually, ads, most of the time, it's true. The first result's the best result there. That's not the case with generative AI. Because of its powers of regeneration, because it's non-deterministic, and because of hallucinations, which, by the way, are a feature, not a bug. Again, if you think about the normal distribution of ideas, a hallucination is just far from the mean. That's all a hallucination is, okay? And when your goal is creativity, when your goal is innovation, you actually want randomness, okay? So it's not and there are ways to protect against it, obviously, but you actually want some of that randomness. So first result's not the best result. This is actually how generative AI, to come full circle, solved my parenting problem. Because I've got thousands of blog posts and podcast transcripts and things like that. I had taken a bunch of my knowledge and encoded kind of a private Jeremy bot, effectively, to brainstorm with myself. If you'd like to brainstorm with myself also, you just send me an email. I'll just send you a link. It's very simple. But I literally, in the hallway, said to my wife, we should try the Jeremy bot. She's like, are you freaking kidding me? I was like, let's just see. What are we going to do? And I kid you not. Then I've programmed it because I'm a teacher, right? So I don't want to give the answer. I want to give the approach. The Jeremy bot kind of has it's like a Socratic, what would Elon Musk do? Or that's a bad example. What would a good person, I don't know, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Sorry, I didn't mean that in a bad way. I'm just playing. My point is, what would Sylvester Stallone do? What would Serena Williams do? What would, Yanni do, right? But it will just kind of Socratically provoke you with a bunch of unexpected analogies, right? And I kid you not, and it's programmed to serve up 10. Because, again, I'm a volume and variation guy, right? So volume 10, variation in terms of Bezos or whatever, right? The 9th idea was incredible. It was like brainstorming with myself, but it was pushing me to think of ideas I wouldn't think of. I had Guy Kawasaki on my show. He's the chief evangelist at Apple for a long time. He's now at Canva, I think. Guy told me he's developed a GPT that he's trained on his own books. He said when someone from the public emails him a question about one of his books, he asks his GPT, verifies the answer, goes, oh, I forgot that story. That's a great answer. Pastes the answer in. He said if his assistant gets a question about his expertise, she doesn't even bother asking Guy anymore. She asks his GPT and then sends the answer, right? The point, this isn't about but it's about unlocking. I had this experience, because some of you are going, dude, are you serious? I had this experience which was profoundly formative for me personally. I wrote this book, and I've got to read the book. I go to Stanford, recording studio, and I'm reading my audiobook. You know what was shocking to me was how many times I wanted to stop and take notes. Think about that for a second. And the director, I would say, hang on, I got to write this down. The director, he's in my ears. He goes, dude, you wrote this book. I go, yeah, but I forgot that story. Yeah, I forgot that research. Yeah, that's a great way of expressing that. Nobody's walking around with the book in their head. Certainly not me, not even the author, right? And so you go, so on the one hand, you go, Guy Kawasaki's got to consult his own GPT. I go, for sure, it's way more reliable than Guy Kawasaki. And I'm not saying anything bad about Guy. You ask my GPT something about my book, it probably has better recall than I do, right? And the point is, it's totally different. It's totally different. Okay, and I experience it in simple situations like parenting challenges. What did we do? The GPT got me and my wife, Michelle, to realize this was an opportunity to have the children take ownership of household rules that they hadn't before. And so we had our 12-year-old prepare a school lesson for her sisters about why our household rules aren't arbitrary. That was the greatest punishment we ever could have given her. And it came from generative AI. I'm a better parent because of it. I was basically brainstorming with myself, and in that moment, I never could have thought of that idea, right? This is hyper practical, but actually amazing. I remember she sat down going, girls, it's really important to listen to what mommy and daddy say. I was like, preach. Right? That's great. Okay. The other watch out. This is not Siri. I mentioned this a second ago. It's not Siri, okay? With Siri, I don't know, have you ever had this experience? I go, hey Siri, text Michelle, FYI, I'm going to be a little bit late because the talk is running long. I'm sorry, I don't see Michelle FYI in your contacts. It's like, this person who I text 20 times a day, you really think that I'm trying to text a new contact whose last name is FYI? Right? It's silliness, and that's an extreme example, but the point is, with Siri, you have to have synthesized your thoughts before you begin. You can't really think on the fly. With an LLM, the LLM is actually capable of thinking as well, in a sense. I mean, you can say air quotes thinking, but I don't have to have synthesized or processed my thoughts so much as vomit them out and then ask the LLM to do the synthesis. And there are many times, they say generally speaking, there's like think to talk and there's talk to think, kind of like introverted, extroverted maybe. Some people think in order to be able to talk and other people talk in order to think. I'm clearly a talk to think. You all didn't say that because you thought it'd be rude. It's not rude. I'm clearly a talk to think. Many times it's not till the end of a conversation with ChatGPT that I actually know what I think about something. But it's the conversation that enabled it, right? And that's the amazing thing, is it's not an interface with the technology where I already know everything that I think and what I want to do about this before I get started. It's a collaborator to help me understand what I know and what I think by the end of the collaboration. And then it will spit it back to me. I can say, I had this post that I was working on a couple days ago, and I didn't know the right way to frame it. I basically said, hey, interview me. I've got kind of 5 key stories that I want to try to pull together here. Interview me about those stories first. Great, tell me about the first experience. Cool. I was on a call with the CEO of the sports organization, and he said this thing, and he asked me this, and da-da-da. Okay, great. What's the next story? Okay, then I was in the classroom, and and then I get to the end, and I said, would you give me 3 or 4 suggestions for how I could position all of those stories and what the proper sequence would be in order to have maximum engagement with my audience? Sure. And it's like, you could position it this way, and then the sequence would be this, or this way, and the sequence would be this, or this way, and the sequence would be this. And then I said, hey, would you rate those on a scale of 0 to 100 in terms of engagement and likelihood to convert? Would you rate those on a scale of 0 to 100? It rated them. How would you improve each of them to score them 100 out of 100? It scored them. It improved them, right? But it's a totally different way of thinking. It really is about collaboration. So, I said at the very beginning, could it is the key. I hope I have provoked one could it, because the answer is yes. As I was working with a basketball organization, with a back office of basketball organization. There's probably 30 people in this room. CEO, we get to this point, and the CEO goes, hey, could it help us find values-aligned sponsors that we could work with that reinforce the values of our organization and the community that we may not know about? They just ask that question. I heard 30, right? Fingers on keyboards. And all of a sudden, people are chiming in. It's this amazing moment. I said, pause. I'm super happy that we've solved this problem. The most important thing is you just thought, could it? It's the most important thing. There's a Hall of Famer, one of my childhood heroes, sitting in the room. And he goes, hey, I have an Aura ring and a Garmin watch, and you were just talking about the code interpreter. Could it compile that data and have it talk to each other and give me insights that neither one? Yeah, and everybody in the room. The important thing is sparking the imagination, right? Could it do this? Could it do that? Yes, so the question is, how do you expand your imagination? You see there, I've got a podcast, which is great. If you want to listen to it, there's stories that are great. I've got a newsletter here. This is, I hope it's a link to the newsletter. It may be a link to the slides. If it's a link to the slides, you can download them. And you send me a note if you want. I can send you a link to the newsletter as well. But the point is, I think your first order ambition should be to learn, where can I go to spark my thinking? If you aren't thinking about how can I think differently, you will miss out. Okay? Podcasts are great. I had, for example, the head of Notion's AI. We haven't released the episode yet, but we'll probably release it next week. She was on just last week. She's like, yeah, we monitor our internal tooling and use and stuff. And she said, we saw an enormous spike a couple weeks ago because one of our engineers was preparing for her performance review, and she used the Notion AI tool in order. She said, ordinarily preparing for a performance review takes like 2 hours. She posted a 2-minute video of how she scoured all of her last year's work assignments and correspondence and pulled together a statement of what she'd accomplished. It took her 2 minutes. And then Sheer, the head of AI at Notion, said, we monitored the internal use of our AI tool. It skyrocketed for the next 2 weeks. What's the point? That AI is good to prepare for performance reviews? No. Sharing specific examples and being in an environment where specific examples are shared unlocks your imagination too. That's the point. Where are you going to unlock your imagination? If this is the only input to your AI journey, one, I'm humbled, and two, it's not going to be good enough. Where are you going to learn? You have to find mechanisms and forums to learn, because you're going to hear a use case and go, oh, could it? Yes. Where are you going to get that? Oh, right? As I said, I try to write about this stuff in my newsletter. I don't think it's the best. There's a great podcast called AI and I by Dan Schipper, who's also on our show, who's there's tons of amazing resources. Put yourself in the stream of knowledge. That's how you're going to learn. The last thing I'll say is, I'd love to give you practice right now, okay? If you have ChatGPT on your phone, I'm going to give you a chance to do these first two things. Take it to voice and turn the tables, if you want to. You can literally pull out your phone and hit the microphone, and it'll be cacophony for the next 30 seconds. That's great. Your phone will be able to pick up your voice. It doesn't matter. But literally, right now, if you want to, I would actually love, at least try it, okay? At least pull out your phone. If you've got ChatGPT on your phone, hit the microphone and just say something like, do I have my phone here? I don't have my phone here. I would do it with you right now. Just say something like this to ChatGPT. You're a professional executive assistant with vast experience. Go ahead. Do it right now. Do it right now. Synthesizing meandering brilliance. I'd love your help capturing insights from an amazing lecture I just attended. Would you please draft a memo that I could share with my team? Make sure to mention something. Please also remind me of what Professor Utley said about such and such. Craft a brief memo I can copy paste into email to share the learnings. But first ask me 2 questions to make sure you understand my context. I love this noise. So what's crazy right now is, a couple hundred people here. There are now a couple of hundred radically different conversations based on the context you give it, right? It's wild, okay? It's super fun. It will unleash you and certainly your team and your organization. I have the incredible privilege of doing stuff like this with lots of organizations. For whatever reason, lots of sporting organizations like basketball. I've got a Premier League cricket team in India that's wanting to do like a AI upskilling, which I'm super excited about because I love going to India. But this stuff, it's not a technology transformation. It's not a digital transformation. This is a people transformation. And the organizations that will win are the organizations who treat this as a people transformation. So it's not out of the IT department, it should be out of the HR department, I really believe, okay? I'll close with this. Going back to the study I mentioned at the beginning, it's not too late, okay? Roughly 50% of the folks surveyed in the study hadn't started 6 months ago. So if you feel like, oh man, I haven't gotten started, you're cool. You know, a great example of this is my grandma. She's in her mid-90s, lives in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Go Pokes if you're an OSU fan. I moved to Texas when I was in high school, so I'm like the traitor. They won't talk to me because I'm a Longhorn, so it's a messed up situation. But I get this text from, I'm joking, it's not, it's beautiful. I get this text from my grandma the other day. I told her this is like my favorite text message I've gotten. This is my favorite text message I've gotten in like a year, Granny. Yeah, right? This is amazing. She had an amazing conversation with ChatGPT about cream of mushroom replacements. The point is, how did she get here? She's an amazing cook. She's doing stuff all the time. How did she get to the point that she's able to imagine this application in her relevant environment? 2 weeks prior, I'd been in the car with her, and she's like, hey, what is this ChatGPT thing you keep talking about? I said, I'll show you. What's an emotional question you've got? She's like, well, honestly, we've been thinking about when it would be appropriate to move into assisted living. I said, great, let's talk to ChatGPT about that. She goes, talk to ChatGPT about it? I said, yeah. Ask us 3 or 4 questions before you give us any advice. Sure, Jeremy, have there been any changes to her mobility recently? I said, Granny? Well, no, I try to go to the gym a couple times a week, and Papa still golfs, and he hit a hole-in-one the other day. Is this what it's asking? Yeah, we're good. Next question. Tell me about her relationship with her caregivers. I said, Granny? Well, Jeremy's mom, my daughter, she drives up every couple months from Dallas, but she's not a caregiver. And the youth group comes by, but it's because we make them cookies. Is this what it means? Yeah, it's good. Next question. We do this, and then I hand her my phone, because I'm driving. Hand her my phone, and she's totally silent. I said, so what do you think? She goes, I never thought about it like this before. I said, like the technology? She goes, not the technology, Jeremy. Assisted living. And then, 2 weeks later, I get this text. Okay? Why do I mention this? Many of you, probably yourself included, you want the epiphany of how can I use it in my relevant context, in my work. There are many organizations going, how can we leverage generative AI in our organization? I say, wrong question. Your people don't know how to leverage generative AI. How in the world are they going to imagine some application in their context? The first thing is, what's an emotional question you're wrestling with that you'd ordinarily talk to your next door neighbor, Faye Ann, about? Have a conversation with ChatGPT. That is a shooting star moment. I'll start to go, whoa, that was super insightful, actually. Could it? Bingo. Again, if I can get you to that could it, that's all I want to do. The answer is yes. What's your question? Thank you so much for having me. I hope to stay in touch with any one of you.